I'm Linda Cooper, the Regional Director for New York State Parks, representing our agency, which welcomed 78.4 million visitors to our many state parks and historic sites in 2021. Alana State Historic Site is a crown jewel in the New York State Park system. Just as artist Frederic Church embraced his hilltop paradise, sculpting this landscape along with his canvases, we honor this special place of beauty and its cultural legacy. This hilltop looks out on viewshed of protected scenery made famous by Thomas Cole and Frederic Church, among others, in the Hudson River School of Art. Indeed, the paintings by these artists brought the American landscape to the world. Tonight, we want to share with you, in addition to the vision that Frederic Church had while he was in residence at Alana. As you will see, this vision was identified in the strategic landscape design plan that was commissioned from the renowned landscape architecture firm of Nelson Bergholz. From it, a new orientation point from which to start your visit at Alana was identified. This project is the product of a public-private collaboration between New York State and the Alana Partnership. It is funded with a combination of public and private dollars. This evening, we have put together information regarding the proposal and will provide an opportunity to ask questions. Our team tonight includes Sean Sawyer, the Washburn and Susan Oberwager president of the Alana Partnership, Diana Carter, the Assistant Division Director for Planning and Analysis within the Division of Environmental Stewardship and Planning for New York State Parks, Tana Bigelow, a parks planner who will be the meeting facilitator, and me. If you are having technical issues, please note them in the chat and our staff will do their best to try to help you. Sean will present the project shortly, then Tana will moderate the questions. Please use the Q&A function, which is at the bottom of your screen, to write in any questions you may have. We will do our best to answer them or defer the answers to get back to you should something need a more in-depth response. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I'd like to turn the program over to Sean Sawyer of the Alana Partnership.
Thank you, Linda, very, very much. Good evening, everyone. Very happy to have you spend a little bit of time with us learning about this exciting new project and the larger context for it at Alana State Historic Site. I'm going to share my screen to show a brief PowerPoint, and just one second. Here we go. So as Linda said, the context for this, for the Frederic Church Center project that we're going to focus on tonight is really a much larger, comprehensive plan for Alana, which is called the Strategic Landscape Design Plan. It was completed in 2015. Just as I arrived at Alana to take my role with the Alana Partnership. This is the cover you're seeing here, just to sort of identify it. But, and this was really the first sort of comprehensive look at the ways in which Frederic Church's entire landscape composition of 250 acres could be recovered, restored, rehabilitated, and brought into the full public experience at Alana. The basic idea is expressed in this diagram. It's a before and an after, the before on the top and the after on the bottom. And it's a heat map, essentially, each dot representing kind of human activity and the clusters of them, the focus of human activity on the site. At the top, you see what were then the existing conditions and still are pretty much to today, although there's a lot more people coming to Alana than ever before. And you can see that that is an experience of what probably many of you, most of you would be familiar with, who are familiar with Alana, of coming off of 9G, entering the park, driving up through it to the top of the hill, to that parking lot, which is limited, and arriving at the backside of the main house, and to the great sort of culminating views that you get from there. So certainly a rewarding experience, one that's loved, but really not at all a comprehensive experience, not anywhere near reaching the potential of what Church's artwork presents as an educational and cultural resource. One way I like to describe it is that of I think it was last year, we had over 200,000 visitors, and only about, first of all, about 16%, I believe it was 16%, took a public tour experience. A lot of that was because in the busiest times, as you well know, Alana often doesn't have tickets, at least not for several hours. So there's a lot of do not wait or sold out capacity issues. We track that. It's roughly between 3,000 and 5,000 people a year who make it all the way to the ticket desk. So we're not even talking about the people who see sold out on the website for a busy weekend and don't come at all. And also another way to express it is that 90% of Olana's visitors, of those 200,000 or so people, only really experience 1% of its landscape, that 2.5 to 3 acres around the main house and the immediate environs of the house. So how do we actually improve the situation for people who are coming? This plan is not about attracting more people. It's about actually enhancing the experience for those people who are already coming to Olana. And that is the diagram at the bottom, which is to spread that energy, to spread that engagement out over the larger site. You'll see particularly 3 clusters. Of course, always will remain the house at the top of the hill and those great views from there, the landscape around the house, but also the historic farm, which I'll show you in a minute, and the idea of actually approaching, having people approach from the beginning, coming off of 9G, to learn about the idea of what Olana is. So this does not come out of thin air. This is, again, a return to the past, a looking at what Frederic Church's vision was and recovering that for our present. And this is an 1886 plan of Olana that represents it at pretty much the peak of its development under Church's time, although he kept working right up until his death in 1900. The main barn, you may be familiar with, is not shown on here. That was when the last structures built in 1900. And so this is the focus of his attention, Olana, for especially the last 20, 25 years of his life. And it starts with the farm. Historically, this is the first house, is a cozy cottage where our offices are. And then, building the main house in the 1870s. And after that, stitching it all together with a composition in landscape, of which the final elements are these wonderful series of over 5 miles of carriage drives that today we activate with programming. And you have to know about the history here. It's not obvious. This is a naturalistic landscape design. It's not formal gardens, but Church started with heavily overworked, deforested land. So he is planting trees, thousands and thousands of them, all very proudly, in his words, native species. He is creating, if you will, his version of an American Eden, of an idyllic, American wilderness landscape, but one that is, clearly tamed a bit for human use and human occupation with architecture and the farm. The lake is artificial as well, was dug out of a marshy cornfield over the course of almost 20 years by hand, by workmen under Church's direct supervision. And he had direct supervision in absolutely every aspect of Olana. This is an aerial photo showing the existing site as it was anyway in 2015. This is an overlay showing what the strategic landscape design plan presented as the future. Overall, you'll see the top of the house, the top of the hill here with the house, the existing parking lot here, the farm with the full extent of what Church's farm was, that we are not going to plunge right into anyway. That's a separate topic, but certainly shows to what a degree it was such an important part of the experience of the landscape and of living at Olana for the Churches. And then finally, the new entry idea. So here is this main house environs, as we call it, the historic farm area, and then the idea of what we're calling the Frederic Church Center for Art and Landscape, a new visitor entry orientation, really a welcome center for Olana. In planning where would this new building go, the first since Frederic Church's death, something we certainly would take not at all lightly, but very, very seriously, Well, we started with data. Nelson Berg Wiltz, the landscape architects, Thomas Wiltz, our lead architect, and looked here. This is a diagram showing the site, the slopes on the site. Red are really essentially unbuildable. You will know that Alana's a hilltop, a series of ridge tops, and the green is flat. Of course, the largest green expanse is the lake. That is not a viable building site, at least for us. And so we had to look at other areas that were more in the sort of tinged yellow areas. And we also had another very important criteria, which was this idea of this sort of historic core and the ways in which there are internal views, not just external views out to the Hudson and the Catskills and the Taconics and the Berkshires and Vermont, but also within Olana, where could you see, you know, the historic landscape, the historic architecture from point to point. And we have this kind of idea of this sort of long, elongated, triangular shape here that is the historic core. So that was an off-limits area. That resulted in 5 sites that were studied quite in detail. 4 and 5 you see here are behind the house at the top of the hill. They were pretty quickly discounted for the fact that they would not serve that idea of spreading energy through the site. Sites 1 and 2, located either on 9G or immediately off of it, would have required really substantial road work to make feasible or really reorienting of the whole entrance and vehicle sequence. And you know, I have to add here, the brilliant thing about this plan, and this was really something, as I understand it, that the former Commissioner Rose Harvey really stressed, was it was not to be a plan that was to be put in a binder up over her desk and not realized. It was to be something that was of a scale and a type to be feasible, to be actually implemented. And so that meant looking at site 3 very, very closely. And so that is what was the preferred site of the 5. Here you see it just again back on the historic core. It is out of that historic core. It is adjacent to the existing vehicle entrance road, also quite close to 9G. But probably the single biggest factor is it gives right on to this view. This is Frederic Church's composition in 3 dimensions using natural materials. And it is entirely an artifice. It is a constructed and designed landscape composed by him, planted up, not cutting trees down, but planting trees, digging out that swampy cornfield to create the 12-acre lake, using some of that wonderful, luxuriant muck that came out of there to cover a rocky hillside up beyond the lake that is a kind of green sward or parkland that leads your eye up to the culminating feature of the site, the architectural feature of the main house, its wonderful exotic design, and certainly not least the skyscape that is ever changing in Olana, that was such a subject of Church as an artist, fascination and wonder, and Church as a scientist, certainly at least a deep reader of science, a subject of study of optics, of light, and of its effects in the landscape. So this view is the view that we hope with this building, should it move forward, will be the first view of Olana for our visitors. And one statistic that's important to keep in mind here is that about between 75 and 80% of our visitors each year are first-time visitors to Olana, which is a wonderful thing for the economy of the valley and the region. But it also means that we get to imprint this idea. This is an idea that is worthy of Monticello, of Mount Vernon, of Hearst Castle. This is lists that we are always on, but not really the experience we're giving to our visitors at this point. This is the overall site plan. It's an abstracted sort of diagram showing you the building as designed and its landscape. The parking lot here, about 45 car capacity. It's very curvilinear. It's a one-way circuit with ability to turn around here. It's very heavily planted. The idea is that the tree canopy will close in over it. And the landscape itself, very, very important feature. This design is landscape driven. That was a prime mover in our selection of an architect, which we'll talk about momentarily. So Thomas Wiltz, Nelson Berg Wiltz are in this as equals with our architect. We believe that this is how Church thought and how he acted at Olana and how we have a responsibility to think and act in his stead. And so the landscape is a series of open spaces and planted spaces, planted all with native species that will lead you in a stair or in an ADA accessible ramp up to that viewpoint. Again, it is the history, the original artwork of churches in the landscape that is the focus of this design. The building here seen in a rough shape was never great at geometry. I believe it's a rhomboid, or it's not quite a rectangle, but it's all about kind of chamfering it so that people, as they approach the building, feel this implicit movement up through the landscape to the view. Let's see, computer is getting a little slow here. Oop, I'll go back one. This is an aerial view, a rendering, showing the building in its proposed site with the parking lot. This gray road is the existing vehicle entry road, the sharp turn as you approach the lake. Here is the new drive into the parking lot with its tree planting. This is the existing historic carriage road. This is the existing intersection of the carriage roads, that viewpoint with the great view. This is the building, a one-story, 4,000 square foot, very quite modest structure, leaning up against or set up against this hill, which is a historic feature, Red Hill at Olana, the lake, as you see. This is the view from as you are dropped off or you arrive from the parking lot, you move towards the building. It is, in a way, almost a piece of, self-deprecating architecture, wonderfully elegant. We had a national search for an architect. We deferred many of the sort of bigger names that had bigger egos, we found, and instead chose the firm Architecture Research Office, led by two principals on our project, Adam Urinsky and Kim Yao, who had really proven experience with really small scale, small budget, fine sort of buildings set in historic landscapes or important landscapes. So two in particular that were our mind are working at the Brooklyn Botanic Garden, and then working with Scenic Hudson down at the Long Dock and Beacon. Those were important projects for us. And they approached this, they already had been working with Thomas Woltz and Nelson Bird Woltz, and so really as a partnership. And I think Adam has described being inspired in particular to create a service building for the 21st century at Olana by looking at those outbuildings, particularly the barns and the farm that served Olana of the 19th century. So this is a wood-clad building using the colors of the historic farm. The program, this is the floor plan, is a very, very basic one. It's all about addressing our visitors' physical and psychological needs on arrival. And it's somewhat comes out of certainly my first couple summers at Olana, up in the parking lot, hearing what those were, down by the visitor center, overhearing comments and questions. And of course, that one thing that we all often need to do after a bit of a car drive, a bathroom. So there is a bathroom facility here. It is designed to be a gender neutral bathroom facility to maximize the space and facility itself. It will have a door to the exterior that can be left unlocked after ticketing hours. This is the ticketing lobby. So this is where you get those psychological questions of, where am I? Because many of our visitors literally see the house from the bridge and decide to drive up. I've heard that in the parking lot many a day. And then what can I do? They're very basic questions. And this is where we'll have people, we'll have screens, we'll have all sorts of means to interact with people and share what Olana is, what you can do, how you can plan your day. And we also will have, for the first time ever, a facility to serve food and beverages. We're calling it a cafe. It's very modest. It's a kind of sandwich, soup, salad, cake, coffee kind of idea. Back. And then this multi-purpose room, which is shown here, set up as a kind of day-to-day use with tables where people can sit down with their coffee and their cake and plan what they're going to do, figure out when their tours are, what the tour options are, and go back and buy tickets. Also, there will be audiovisual displays and interpretive materials, both in the lobby and in the multi-purpose room. So there'll be opportunity to engage with those as well. This is a rendering of the entry lobby. Here, I hope you'll start to get a sense of the kind of really wonderful sustainable materials out of which this is built. The timber structure, the timber frame you're seeing here will be built out of cross-laminated timber, also called sometimes engineered wood. It's a kind of very elaborate plywood, I suppose is one way to put it in layperson's terms. But it's really a state-of-the-art structure in terms of sustainability, because it allows small caliber wood to be incorporated through this lamination process into really strong structural members that are also really handsome and, you know, give it this sort of timber feeling. Thanks to our amazing Assemblywoman member, Dee Dee Barrett, we have been connected with the SUNY School of Environmental Science and Forestry and are working with them on this. And they are particularly excited that this will be their Sustainable Resources Division there, particularly excited that this will be the first publicly accessible model in New York State of this type of construction, which they're working very hard to kind of promote and develop the science and the production of in economic development terms. And many other features that make this a very green building. It will be carbon neutral. We'll be using very long-lasting materials throughout the building, nothing too ephemeral, nothing that needs to be replaced in 5 or 10 years, but more on a sort of 50 to 80-year cycle of resources. And you will also, so you're seeing the light quality in the space. You're seeing how this is a space that's designed and scaled for people and for human interaction. You see the great opening through to the multi-purpose space. This is that a rendering there. You see more of that timber structure very elegantly sort of splayed out over the space. You see that great open wall of windows that gives you so much light and a kind of connection to the natural environment, albeit a designed landscape environment, just like at the main house. And that indeed is part of the inspiration here, is this ability to see through, to frame views, which is very much the experience in the main house at Olana. And I should say also really Cozy Cottage in the farmhouse. And then this is the view from the terrace, that view up to the main house across the lake. And this looks back down on the building, and you can see how it is set down. You're almost sort of seeing the roof of it. You're seeing a nighttime sort of, or I should say late afternoon view. So it's a bit lit. The multi-purpose room, if you zoom in on it, is showing a lecture in progress, which might be one of its uses. You're seeing the landscape as this also experience, and you're seeing, which we will see for the first 30 years anyway of this building, the view of the Catskills, which Frederic Church saw when he first came to the site, because this site had literally very few trees on it. This was a deforested site, as I mentioned before. So we're going to recover that for a brief moment, at least until the new plantings grow up. And then again, remind us of what it's all about, which is focusing on what Olana is and bringing that bigger message about what you can do here. This is the nature of tours, and I'd be glad to answer questions about the kind of programming we're thinking about and how that will all work. But it is this view that captures it, I feel, so quintessentially. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Sean. Welcome again, everyone. As Linda said, I'm Tana Bigelow. I'm a park planner for New York State Parks. I'm based in Albany, and the Taconic region is one part of the state that I provide planning support for. We're gonna start the Q&A portion of the meeting. I'm gonna moderate, and just to remind you, please use the Q&A function on the bottom of your screen, the button, and not the chat function. Just click on the button, a window pops up, and you can type your question in. And if you do have technical issues, just indicate that in a question, and we'll see what we can do for you. And if others, others may be having the same problem as well. So with that, we're interested to hear your thoughts on this project. So I will open it up for questions. I see that there already have been some questions typed in. I'm going to start with the earliest one. First one is that you are aware that we're in a climate crisis. How do you justify the carbon footprint of this project? And then there's a follow-up question. How many trees will be cut down? I'm going to hand that over to our panel.
So I guess I'll take a stab at that one. We're clearing about 3.5 acres of trees for this particular project, and about another 0.8 acres for the sanitary waste. So it's not a particularly large building. It's about a 4,500 square foot building. And as Sean said, it's going to be heavily treed, heavily open to the out of doors. The reason the building is there was, if you go back to what Sean explained, was that the need for the building is not being addressed by any other buildings that are on site. So it is being built in a sustainable fashion with sustainable green technology, but it will perform a function and be of tremendous use as part of this site.
It's also designed to be a carbon neutral and net zero building that would meet the LEED Gold standards.
Okay, thank you both. The next thing a participant wrote in is, it doesn't appear to be exactly a question. You can correct me if I'm wrong about that, but it looks like it's a quote from the National Trust for Historic Preservation. Jim Lindbergh wrote, "To avoid what one of the report's co-authors describes as a sub-optimal future, we must use every tool available to reduce carbon emissions. One of those tools is building reuse. Reuse avoids the upfront embodied carbon emissions that occur when materials are mined, harvested, manufactured, transported, and assembled to create a new structure. Preservationists have long touted the environmental benefits of building recycling and argued that the greenest building is one that's already built. We have published research showing that it can take from 10 to 80 years to pay back the carbon debt that is incurred when an existing building is replaced with a new structure, even if the new building is highly energy efficient." Would anybody like to comment on that?
Well, I'll start and let Sean finish up. Again, the location and projected use of this building is not being met by any of the other buildings. There are plans in the future to reuse, to stabilize the barn structure, to continue using the buildings that are in use, and to continue with making sure that the structures on this historic site remain intact and viable. This new building is performing a function that is not met by any of the others.
All right.
Yeah, I don't have, there's no existing building that's being torn down or anything. This is right, serving a use that, it's fulfilling a need that doesn't exist on the site, since there's been no basic infrastructure addition since 1967.
Okay. All right. Thank you both. The next question a participant wrote, "What will become of the current visitor center building? Will it be turned into its original purpose of being a carriage house, but for tours?"
Well, I think we're talking about that. I don't think there's a firm, we do plan on keeping at least the majority of the gift shop at the top of the hill, but it will be open to the public, interpretable space as well. And yes, it would be nice to interpret more of those stories at Olana. This year, we're going to be introducing one that really, a tour that focuses more on the staff and the people that worked alongside the churches to make the site run. So it's a direction we're definitely looking to go.
All right. So another question, how many parking spaces will be provided?
45.
All right. Will the tours begin at the new center? Will there be a shuttle service to transport the visitors from the center to Olana?
Yes, the check-in for tours will be at the new building. Tours will be really evolving. I don't know if whoever's asking the question has been to take a tour recently, but we have a whole suite of landscape tours. We're really trying to encourage people to begin with a landscape tour, just as they would have if they were visiting the churches, arriving in carriage, moving through the landscape, often having it narrated by one of the church family members as they did that. So we do visualize that this is the primary starting point, orientation point. We very likely already have time tickets for tours at the main house. And that is going to be the best way to efficiently make sure as many people as possible can experience all of Olana. Transport in the plan, again, which was conceived as something that was doable within the reach of the existing partners at the site, the Olana Partnership and New York State Parks, is for people to use their own vehicles, but ideally to walk. And if you've been to Olana recently, everybody is walking. And it's fantastic, and it's healthy, and it's aesthetically invigorating and inspiring. So we're really hoping that a lot of this will be done on foot. But the reality is, there are people who will need to drive. We will still have the parking lot at the top of the hill. We're not expanding that. And parking is always going to be a challenge on a very hilly site. But the shuttle idea is something that was looked at, but it was felt to be far beyond, at that time anyway, the capacity of the organizations to support it. But we may be getting there sooner than we think. So we're certainly going to keep that on the table, and that would minimize the number of cars that move through the site as well.
Okay, thank you. Again, there's a question about the retail shop. Is it going to be in the current building? I believe you already touched on that. Will visitors continue to drive their personal cars to the top of the hill?
I think I just answered that one.
Yeah, you got that. What kind of interpretive material are you considering for the new building? Will you try and tell the story of Olana there?
I know who is asking that question, and we're looking to you to be part of that, helping us figure that out. Yes, we will be telling the bigger idea, but to experience Olana, you're there. There's nothing like the firsthand experience of this place. And so that's what we'll be trying to, we will be inspiring, I hope, people to understand that this is a place that you cannot do in a quick drive-by of an hour. You really need to plan your visit, ideally. We're now at about 60% of people planning their visit, which is great. We'd love to get to 75, 80%. That would be ideal. And that you will have plenty of things to occupy you if you have to wait 2 or 3 hours to get to a tour that's at the top of the hill.
Okay. Let's see. Have you considered car-free? Create a large parking lot at the very bottom.
I defer to my colleague in State Parks.
I've heard the suggestion. There's nothing on the plans at the moment. So I think we'll wait and evaluate that at some other time.
Okay. As of now, those are the only questions that I have. If anybody else would like to add their questions, this is the opportunity. We will also, in case people don't think of a question and it comes up later, we will have the opportunity to email a question, or if someone was not able to attend and had a question, you can email us at top@olana.org. And we ask that you could try to do that within the next week or so. But we have plenty of time if anybody still has questions they'd like to bring up.
I think there's a couple more that just came in.
Okay, let's see. Yes, 1 second here. With the amount of money being invested, okay, it's a follow-up to the larger parking lot, I believe. What is the estimated cost of the project?
I believe now the estimate from the end of design is all in about $11 million.
And what is the time frame and budget? You just answered. So time frame.
Linda, do you want to?
Sure. The time frame is depending, right now it's going through the seeker reviews, which is the State Environmental Quality Review. And assuming there are no red flags that have been raised so far, it's still going through process. And as that completes and we move into full construction documents and bidding, the anticipated start time would be 2023, and the anticipated opening would be sometime in 2024. So that's the time frame, but that all depends on things going smoothly.
All right. How is it being funded?
As I noted earlier in my remarks, it's sort of a public-private partnership. There are a number of grants that have been secured. There's donations, private donations. There are donations of members of the Alana Partnership Board, and there's money coming from state parks.
Okay.
Yes, so just to specify that, we're doing a $10 million private campaign. We're now just over 7 million in private funds raised, and we've received outside of parks, 3 New York State grants, including one from the Assembly, and of $1 million, which was publicly announced in the autumn. And in December, we were successful in 2 grant applications, one to the Empire State Development Corporation for their carbon neutral economic development program. That is a matching grant. It matches 20% of what we've raised privately. So at the time we had raised $7 million. So it's a $1.4 million grant. And then we also received an award from NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, through their, I'm sorry, the ESD was not the carbon neutral. ESD was the Market New York program, excuse me. Carbon neutral grant program is obviously through NYSERDA, the Energy Authority. And that is really aimed at helping us to make it a carbon neutral, net zero, sustainable building. And I believe there's a question about some more of the sort of aspects of that. Can I continue with that?
Sure.
So it is an all-electric building. That was a choice we made. It will have EV charging stations in the parking lot. Our tour vehicles are electric, and they will also be charged nearby. Carbon neutral. This is something I've learned a bit about in writing the grant, but I am not the expert. So, carbon neutrality, as I understand it, also means that you are choosing materials that are long lasting and durable, that you're not kind of creating, a kind of disposable building. You're creating something that will endure and last. So thus, instead of a cheaper roof form, we're using a metal roof that has the longest life cycle of any roof material. We're using, all the glazing is bird sensitive glazing. It has, that little ceramic frit in it to keep the birds from colliding with it. And so, it's also the nature of the use of wood in the building, which is the predominant building material. So that is not only, sort of wonderful resonance with Church and his passion for trees, but it's also, something that is really great for forest health, because you're using small caliber trees, you're cleaning up forests, you're keeping them healthier. And so those are really the major elements of it that really click a lot of the boxes. I'm sure there are a few little things that I haven't touched on.
Okay, thank you, Sean. So there was another comment about, I think, considering the possibility of keeping the parking lot at the bottom car-free. And then there's a question, you've shared the view from the new structure up the hill. What is the view down the hill towards the structure? Is it visible?
Well, I believe I wasn't present for it, but our staff was and Parks was. They did a site test and it was completely not visible. It's certainly how it's designed. If you come to Alana and you walk the site, you'll see the really ingenious, Church was a passionate geologist. He read science all the time. He knew his rocks. Somebody hiked the Catskills, right? And the Green Mountains and the Andes twice. So he used, the lake is framed by ledges. And the lake at the south end has this wonderful piece of ledge, which I could show you. I can bring up that section again to show you, but it really provides the essential screen is the topography itself. We really set down in a bowl, and then at the other end of the bowl where the entrance road is also a sort of lip. So it's almost like a perfect sort of little basin for this facility to sit within without being seen from anywhere on the site.
All right. So with this money, have you thought of creating a path on 9G on the Ilana entrance side to connect with the bike path, as many people walk this way and it seems dangerous?
Yes, I think that the connections and trails are critically important, in particular from connections from the Skywalk, things on 9G, and the current trail that's being looked at is one that connects to the Columbia Green Community College. So we agree. We'll be looking at all of the trail connections and paths over the coming years.
Okay. Will the building be seen from outside the site?
I do not believe so. No. I mean, you can't see it. You can't see it from the entry road itself. That's not 9G, but actually turning up into the property, you know, and then you're coming around. You will see it as you come around that corner. If people are familiar with Ilana, you come in off 9G, you go up a hill pretty steeply. You come up along a bank that's quite a ledge. You can see the rock sticking out. Then you make a turn. That's when you'll see it, which is when you need to see it to be able to know where it is and go into it. And then when you leave that parking lot, you go along the lake. And really from there on, it is not visible to you. It's in your tail view, in your rear view mirror.
All right. I have reached the end of the questions for now. Let's see. Okay, here's another one. Do you intend to keep the center open during the winter season?
Absolutely. Ilana is, and our strategic plan calls for it being an ever more year-round site. Ilana is open 365 days a year, free access. There is no vehicle use fee. We, see people all year long. We're doing more and more programming in the winter. It's the life that was lived in connection with the natural environment and all of its amazing health and psychological benefits. So absolutely.
Okay. All right. We've got a long typed in here. Very nice. I'm a local artist and drawing instructor. I've toured interior, the interior, right, but of the house, I imagine. Yet it was some years ago. My hope and suggestion is that you might include somewhere at the visitor center house a display touching on the formal training of church. It might include prints, drawing manuals, like the one that Cole brought over from England, surviving 3D models, not just mature working drawings, sketches, but earlier student work to help us better understand their educational drawing diet of the time. Understandably, the less romantic training of artists is often overlooked by scholars and it remains an obscure topic. While it may not be the highlight, I think it's crucial to emphasize this ingredient in Church's work. It might also emphasize shared relationship between architecture and painting. Thank you.
Thank you, Russell. That's very interesting. I'd love to talk to you more about that. So please, don't hesitate to be in touch and, come take a tour with us.
Anybody else?
I did notice that one of those questions was from Assemblymember Dee Dee Barrett, and I just think a nice shout out for her for attending this evening and for her extraordinarily generous contribution to this project and her support for not only Ilana State Historic Site, but all of our parks and state historic sites. Thank you.
And I would say that, as I've said privately, and now this is officially a public, that she has really been the one to lead us firmly in this direction of a sustainable design that is, green, carbon neutral, net zero, and the relationship she's helped us to build, really essential to the future of the site. And we're really excited about that and really appreciate her involvement.
And also notice Jim Gold was one of the other questioners. Yes. Who was a long time very key staff member at Ilana. So thank you for joining us. And I did have one omission earlier. I did talk about Nelson Bird Waltz, but the LA group was also the partner partner landscape architecture group on the strategic landscape design plan. So my omission.
Yes,
earlier.
and really essential for its implementation. Absolutely.
Okay. Someone typed in they have to go, but they look forward to seeing the project successfully completed.
Great. If there are no more questions, we really just appreciate the ability to share information on this project and to hear the questions. And as Tana said, if there are follow-up questions, we'd be interested in knowing them, and we'll continue working on the project and hopefully bring it to fruition in the coming years.
All right, I do have one more question. Is there currently existing any art ed component in the house itself that I may have overlooked?
We deal with that largely in our educational focus programs with K through 12 and college, and of course with our community college program, which is all ages. And so, you know, I encourage you again, Russell, to come and meet Carolyn Keogh, our Director of Education, and she'll talk to you about how central that sort of is in a lot of our curriculum. For the public, they definitely hear about the methods that Church learned, his time studying with Cole, and you know how he worked to create his paintings out of his direct observation in nature and his study of, you know, the masters and all of the pieces in the house that come together to tell that story. But we don't have a, you know, interpreted gallery. We have no gallery space. The whole of Olana is the gallery, of course.
Although the studio is in the house, and there are a lot of times when the tours are going through the studio, there is discussion of his method and how he,
Yes,
what
absolutely.
he was doing. And likewise, our partnership with the Cole Center and the studio across the river. I think, you know, these are all aspects we can always expand, and would look forward to your input in doing so.
All right.
And my only last one is that Amy Hausman, the director of Olana for the state, was unable to be here this evening. I think she's listening in, but was unable to be on the panel. And again, you know, the collaboration between the partnership and the state is what makes this site in particular very special. And we really appreciate the community input, the community support, the legislative support, the staff support, and all the things that go into making projects like this a success. Thank you.
All right, and the last question, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Sean.
I just see we have a request to have
Yeah.
the follow-up questions repeated, you know.
Yep. So you can email, use the email TOP at the Olana Partnership at olana.org. All right, well, thank you, everyone. I would like to end the Q&A section of the meeting, and I'll hand it over to Linda for closing remarks.
I just had mine, but we are going to put up the welcome screen at the very end, which has the address and the email address. And it's again, it goes to top, the Olana Partnership at olana.org. And if you go onto the website, you'll be able to get more information. And we look forward to speaking with anyone in the weeks and months to come. And
Sean, did you want to say
Sure.
anything else?
Yeah, I mean, I just really, again, appreciate people taking the time and to be interested and involved. You know, it's so important. And, you know, if anybody would like to find more information, certainly email. You can also stop by at Cozy Cottage if you know Olana well, and talk to me or to Mark Brzezowski, our Senior Vice President, who is very much listening in here and very much involved in this. And we'd be glad to, you know, discuss your thoughts and take you around, and you can see the site too. I think you probably, hopefully tonight, I hope if you're familiar with Olana, you know where those maps were and diagrams were orienting you to.
All right. Well, with that, I'd like to thank everyone, the people on the panel, and those of you who took the time to join us this evening. And I will close the meeting.
Thank you, Tana.
Okay.
Thank you for facilitating.
Good night, all.